Hello and welcome to Inside Number 9, The Art of the Twist, a one-off podcast episode by me, Alfie the Mog. Today I'm going to be discussing a few of my favourite episodes as we delve into what makes them so interesting and why the twists of these episodes work so well. I'm going to be going over the plot briefly for those who haven't seen the episodes or need a little bit of a reminder, as well as going into some background facts about the episodes which I find interesting. Without further ado, let's see what awaits us inside Number 9. The first episode we're going to be talking about today is Zanzibar, which is the first episode from the fourth season of the show. The episode focuses on the events occurring on the ninth floor of the titular Hotel Zanzibar and the chaos that erupts as two identical twins meet up for the first time inside this hotel. The plot of this episode is heavily inspired by a comedy of errors by Shakespeare, which is about two twins who aren't identical. However, the fact that they are twins still causes a lot of chaos for the other characters. The entirety of the episode's dialogue is in iambic pentameter with lots of rhyming couplets, which is another reference to Shakespeare. Reese and Steve have clearly been incredibly inspired by him for this episode, as there are dozens of other references to Shakespeare plays. An example of this is the B plot of the episode, which is a reference to both Hamlet and Macbeth, as one of the twins, Prince Rico, is brought to the hotel by his bodyguard Henry. However, when Prince Rico enters his hotel room for the night, Henry says to the audience in a private soliloquy, another reference to Shakespeare, that he's plotting to kill Prince Rico so that his own father can become king. Another reference to another Shakespeare play inside the plot is a scene in which a love spell is cast on one of the characters who has fallen out of love with their partner, a reference to A Midsummer Night's Dream. There's lots of other quotes throughout this episode which reference Shakespeare. For example, Fred the hotel's bellboy says smile and hope for decent tips, a reference to that one may smile and be a villain from Hamlet. Another quote from Hamlet comes from Henry when he's talking about his plans to kill Prince Rico, as he says, sleep well, sweet prince, which is a reference to Hamlet's death at the end of the play, in which his friend Horatio says, good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest. As mentioned earlier, Steve and Reese use soliloquy frequently as a plot device, as it was often used in Shakespeare plays. This is essentially when a character speaks directly to the audience. Not that they break the fourth wall by doing this, but just the fact that they're not speaking to any character in particular, rather outwards. Both Reese and Steve met at university when they were studying theatre, and Reese Shearsmith himself has even stated that he thinks the two are best when performing live. For this reason, even though Zanzibar wasn't performed live, I wonder if this episode is particularly special to him because it's essentially a televised form of a stage play, so he's going back to his roots by doing this. As I mentioned a second ago, a lot of the plot focuses around the chaos that forms after the two twins go to the hotel, unknowing of each other. The episode culminates with the two meeting in a scene which feels genuinely heartfelt and something that can be quite rare for Inside Number 9. On the topic of heartfelt episodes, I would like to move on to the second episode we'll be discussing today, The 12 Days of Christine. This episode follows the titular character Christine over a 12-month period of her life, with all of the episode taking place within her flat. This is the first seasonal special of the series, and I think a lot of people are expecting something very classic Inside Number 9 for this episode. By that I mean your classic, very dark, horror-based comedy, which is very much not what this episode is. While the episode maintains a lot of the show's horror roots, it delves much more into psychological horror, as well as black comedy, and is much more focused on the bittersweet, emotionally driven plot. Over the 12-month period of Christine's life that we see, we watch her become more and more dishevelled as she begins to forget things and see people who aren't really there. This psychological nature and the forgetfulness that takes place within the episode reminded me very much of the album Everywhere at the End of Time by The Caretaker. This album is a 6.5-hour long art piece that explores what it's like to have dementia, with the album becoming more disjointed, confusing and maddening as it goes on. A theme which is very much linked in with the episode, as Christine only becomes more and more disjointed and confused and mad as the episode continues. Another reason that this episode reminds me of this album is They use the song Time to Say Goodbye as a motif throughout the episode. However, there aren't really any clues as to why that is important or what the motif is for until the end of the episode, which makes that final impact hit so much harder. The final twist of the episode comes in an emotional scene at the very end, in which Christine is sat at the dinner table on Christmas. She is handed a gift to unwrap, which is a photo book full of pictures from throughout her life. While flicking through the photo book, she says it's like her life is flashing before her eyes, before she looks up to the camera and says she realises what's happening now. The camera cuts to Christine on the brink of death, her head rested on the steering wheel of her car, as she has clearly been in a crash. Outside the window, Christine sees a man in a raincoat, the other driver, who she has seen throughout the episode as visions that aren't really there. The other driver says that it was his fault and that he tried to get Christine out but he couldn't, but at least he managed to get the child out. This is why throughout the episode, this man has been seen trying to steal Christine's child. Christine was seeing this as someone trying to kidnap her son, whereas in reality, this was someone trying to save him. She says she doesn't want to leave, however the others tell her that she must, in which she responds that it's time and she's ready. The episode ends here with her looking into the camera, and as the credits roll, Time to Say Goodbye plays one more time. This episode is incredibly emotional, and is spoken about in detail in the documentary episode they made following the series' conclusion.
The third and final episode I'll be talking about today is Wise Owl. This episode is heavily inspired by public safety videos from the 1970s, specifically a series called Charlie Says. The art style of the animated parts of Wise Owl looks incredibly similar, even down to the appearance of the protagonist Ronnie and the animal's sidekick. The voice acting of Ronnie and Tony sound very similar too. The entire episode is incredibly off-putting, really mimicking the unsettling nature that a lot of these safety videos have, especially Charlie Says. This episode delves much more into the horror aspects of Inside Number 9, with very little of this episode being able to be considered comedy. There are clear parallels and allusions in the episode to tell the audience that Reece Shearsmith's character Ronnie is the same boy that's cartoonified in the Wise Owl animated sequences, which really draws the viewer in as we're waiting to see what the two being linked is going to mean. Throughout the episode, we see Ronnie do various dangerous acts, which always transition into an animated sequence from the Wise Owl safety videos. The formula for these episodes is that Ronnie does something dangerous, and then Wise Owl flies into the room saying twit you, before explaining that what he's doing is dangerous and why it's a bad idea. Around halfway through the episode, we see an animated sequence in which Ronnie's sister is asking to light her birthday candles with matches. Ronnie tells her that this is a bad idea and that they should wait until their mum comes home. We don't see the events that directly follow this. However, we know that this somehow results in their house being burnt down and Ronnie's sister dying. We also learn that the house we've seen Ronnie in doesn't belong to him, and instead belongs to his father, the voice actor for Wise Owl, who returns at the end of the episode. Ronnie blames his father for the death of his sister, and we see an alternate version of the scene in which she's trying to light her birthday candles. Ronnie tells her that it's a bad idea, and Wise Owl, now on the sofa holding a bottle of alcohol, tells him that it's fine and that he should just let her do it. Ronnie says that he still thinks it's a bad idea and they should wait until their mum comes home, and then Wise Owl gets up and leads Ronnie to a stairway, telling him that she can light her candles if she wants to and that they need to go somewhere private. This obviously implies that Ronnie's father was abusive to him, an absolutely heartbreaking revelation that makes this dark episode even more unsettling. Back in the real world, Ronnie tells his dad that he intends on going and telling his mum what he had been doing to him when he was a child. His father tells him that he can't do that, and he adopts the Wise Owl voice, that Ronnie must always do what Wise Owl says. Ronnie replies by saying not anymore before storming out the house. We go back to an animated sequence where we see Ronnie as a child age up into who he is now. This episode is very unsettling, however also very heartwarming, as we see Ronnie, a victim of childhood abuse, get over his trauma and push back against his father, finally taking control of his own life again. That was all 3 episodes that I wanted to discuss for today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions about the episodes I've discussed or want even more detail, feel free to put those things in the comments and I will try and reply to as many of you as possible. This kind of informational run through of the episodes is something which I find quite interesting, but also a little bit difficult to go through if I'm honest. So I'd appreciate any feedback in the comments so I can make these even better if I want to make something like this again. Thank you again very much for listening. This has been Alfie the Mog talking about Inside Number 9, The Art of the Twist.